As per our last and definitely not least speaker today, we're going to have with us Dr. Patrick Fogarty, who is the Director of Technology at Jericho School District. So it's one of the largest and most prestigious, I would say, districts in Long Island. Patrick, you tell me then if that's wrong. I believe that's the case. There you go. Patrick, essentially, he brings a lot of leadership experience in technology, more than 20 years, I believe. But on top of that, he's also an author. And what I think is even more interesting is that the last few years he's been putting a lot of thinking behind how we should leverage AI and what's the role that AI is going to have in our schools and our districts. And I think that here there are always two very interesting layers, right? One is like what it will be, and the other one is what it should be. And I think that both are important. One, because we need to get a realistic sense of where this is going. But second, because we have agency also to some extent within our context, and understanding what we can do and what we should do is, I believe, part of our responsibility as leaders. I know it's a hot topic. I know many of you are hearing about this all the time. And I think Patrick's take is going to be a fresh one, because it's going to be practical and it's going to challenge some of, I believe, either preconceived or just like superficial ideas that we may have heard, because the press is just shooting at us so many things lately. And anyway, very excited about this. And Patrick, the stage is completely yours. Yay!
Confused but enthusiastic greeting. Thank you, sir. Like confused, thanks a lot. No, I just heard like, okay, all right. We're a little happy he's here. We're not super happy he's here. We're moderately enthused. So thank you for joining us today. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you to Bernat for inviting me, and to Innovamat for having me. They're booting up my Canva right now. So about a year ago, I've been a director of technology for a long, long time. But about a year ago, I had not given one presentation on AI. As of today, I think this is like the 30th or 31st that I've given on AI, because things are moving rather quickly. So given that our discussions today, a lot of them have been centered on progress, innovation, and the future of education, I feel like we'd be remiss to not discuss navigating the future of education in a world that's going to be at least partially driven by artificial intelligence. I may have to just shout out unless the clicker's not on. Oh, there we go. That's all right. So just going to quickly run through 5 major areas of discussion today. We're going to talk about defining artificial intelligence. We'll talk about the principles of AI in education, why it matters, some of its limitations, and ultimately how we're going to be integrating AI into classrooms in the future. Before I go any further, I'm going to ask you, how many people are using AI in classrooms now or in educational environments now? That's a lot. That's more than usual. That's great. And how many people are talking a lot about artificial intelligence in their districts? Yeah, that's pretty common that we're talking about it, but we haven't quite started to make progress yet. Next slide, please. So real quick, an overview of artificial intelligence. I don't want to get too deep into this because I think most of us have heard a little bit about it at this point. But artificial intelligence is just really the replication of human intelligence in digital form. These systems are generally powered by algorithms using techniques like machine learning, deep learning, and rules. It's not what people think it is quite yet. We were talking earlier, and one of the examples I gave of how artificial intelligence fails us is if you get 5 or 6 phones, cell phones, in your car, and you drive any random location you want, and you stop the car, and you go on Google Maps, there's now a traffic jam in that location. You and your 5 phones can do that. So if you and your 5 phones can do that, is Google Maps reporting on a traffic jam? No. It's reporting on a bunch of phones being in one place. It's an abstraction. Artificial intelligence is an abstraction. It is not generally doing what we think it's doing, but rather it's trying to do what we expect it to do. And I'm going to get a little further into that in a few minutes. Years ago, I began my career in technology working for a company called eSpark Learning, which very few of you will have heard of. But eSpark is a company that was at the forefront of artificial intelligence. What eSpark does is assigns a pathway of apps to each student based on their NWEA or STAR or other standardized test results. Very rudimentary form of artificial intelligence, but we were really kind of early into the machine learning world. Once I left eSpark, I didn't hear about AI again for about 9 years. It's really only come back into my world in the last year or so. There's really 3 types of AI that we're going to discuss today, but there was really only one, but there's 3 you should know about. Narrow AI, which is the AI we're all used to. It operates under a set of narrow constraints. Deep AI, which is what we're all talking about and hopefully moving towards. This is the AI's ability to discern needs, emotions, beliefs, and thought processes of other intelligent entities. One of the number one things that young people are doing with artificial intelligence is not cheating on their homework. They are seeking emotional support from AI. I'll give you the statistics on that a little later on. Kids are talking to ChatGPT. I have a 12-year-old daughter who I have seen her ChatGPT because we share an account. Because I monitor her usage, which you should do too. And we share a ChatGPT account so I can see what she's typing into it. And I don't want to give you too many details on what she's typing into it, but she's had questions about boys that she didn't ask me or her mother. She's had questions about other things, personal things that she's typing into ChatGPT. So we haven't gotten to a point where we have deep AI that can make heads or tails out of those emotions or those feelings that my daughter is inputting into it. But young people already think that AI is a friend, that it's learning, that it understands them on some level. And artificial superintelligence is really not worth discussing. We're going to talk about the Terminator movies in a little bit. I think Terminator 2 is probably the greatest movie ever made. So I'm definitely going to show you a clip or 2 from that. But we'll talk about Skynet becoming self-aware and what super intelligence would really be. How does AI learn? Learns in quotes for a reason we'll get to in a little bit. Basically, we feed AI, these artificial intelligence programs, a huge set of data, just 8 million pictures of a duck. And after it looks at 8 million pictures of a duck, what can it do? It can tell you what a duck looks like. Is it perfect? No. It's only as good as the input. So if we feed it 8 million pictures of a duck, but 5 million of them were drawn by me who cannot draw, it does not know what a duck looks like. It knows what I think a duck looks like. These are limitations that are inbuilt to artificial intelligence. So it takes in a large data set and uses that information to learn and grow, then it completes whatever task we've put in front of it. So when you're typing into chat, how many people have ChatGPT accounts and are using it? Okay, bless you. So here's the thing about ChatGPT. It's not answering your question. It's trying to predict what you think it should say. Okay? ChatGPT is not actually answering you. It's putting one letter in front of the next to figure out what does this human being want me to say in response to this question. And that's why it's wrong and strong a lot of times. It's confidently incorrect about a lot of things. And we'll talk about why that is. But ultimately, we were really having an interesting conversation at our table during lunch. We want certainty, right? We want answers. Humans want to put in a question and get a definitive answer. They don't want to filter through 300 search results and figure out what's correct. They want it to be fed to them. And ChatGPT specifically, but other AI programs really do that for us. I'm not going to click it 3 times because I know what happens then. So I'm going to push it once extra hard, and it's going to happen anyway. Okay, so I'm going to play a little game because I get really bored sitting in these things if someone doesn't amuse me. So I'm going to amuse you. I've got 2 pictures up here. I'm going to ask you, who's a real person and who was generated by artificial intelligence? I'm not coming to your school to do PD if you get it right. Just not going to happen. But that's a nice offer. I came very close. I was feeling very good about myself. Who's real and who's fake? What's that? Yeah, just throw your hand in the air to tell me if you think it's the person to your left. Raise your hand if you think they're fake. Look at y'all looking around to see who else is raising their hand. You don't have to do that. No one's going to be in trouble. Okay, if you think the person on the right is fake, please raise your hand. Controversy. So the person on the right is a real person. The person on the left is generated by artificial intelligence. Now, I saw the hands, and I know a lot of you got it wrong. I'm not going to call anybody out, but I saw you. And there's a few giveaways as to what tells us when a person is generated by AI. They're not really important because they're going to be fixed within the next 10 minutes. So whatever you can say about AI, whatever you can tell me, oh, well, it's the earrings, they don't look natural. That's true for now, but it won't be true very soon. If you take it, we'll look a little later on at how ChatGPT is doing on standardized tests to see the leaps and bounds at which it's growing, the speed that it's growing at. Oh, good. Okay. This is one of my favorites. We got a guy who looks like he was in a nu metal band in 2003, and we got a lady on your left. So is the guy who looks like he likes Limp Bizkit real, or is it the lady on your right who is real? So if you think it's a Limp Bizkit guy, raise your hand if he's real. You guys are, yeah. How many Limp Bizkit fans are they today? Not that many. He's one. All right. If you think it's the lady, raise your hand who's real. Okay. It's Limp Bizkit guy. Yeah, great news for all those other Limp Bizkit fans out there. So again, a couple of giveaways. One, if you take a look at the picture on the right, on your right, she's in front of some nebulous, unknowable background. It's just a blur of colors, whereas he looks to be actually outside. So that's a bit of a giveaway. Otherwise, you really wouldn't have a whole lot of way of telling these two apart. So I got one more of these, and then I'm going to show you a writing passage. Okay. So image generators, AI image generators notoriously struggle with what we call accoutrements, right? Like earrings, hats, jewelry, makeup. So I chose one where two people both have jewelry, makeup, etc. on, to make the point of comparison. So who's real and who's fake? If you think it's the woman on your left who's got the navy blue on, raise your hand. If you think it's the person on the left. If you think it's real, the person on the left is real. Okay, you think it's the person on the right who's real? Raise your hand. Oh my, overwhelming. Oh, you were right. Most of you were pretty right on with that. What told you? What was the giveaway? How'd you know? If you knew. The hat? Okay. Didn't look right? What looks wrong about it? Just doesn't look quite right? Okay, fair enough. So that's examples of AI generating people. A mixed bag in whether or not we can tell or not. Now, when we talk about things, so I'm going to give you an example that's from, let's call it a neighboring school district, because I'm certainly not going to give you an example from my school district. That would be potentially embarrassing. So this is from someone else's school district, definitely not my school district. We had a student submit for an art contest a very good-looking piece of work, like an incredibly layered, well-thought-out piece of Photoshop, like art that we were all really kind of blown away by, to the point where people brought it to me as a tech director and said, hey, this kid knows what he's doing. And then a couple of us looked at it and we were like, I don't know, it feels a little familiar. And it took us a while, but ultimately we found the program he was using and the prompts he was feeding it to generate his art. And that opened up a whole lot of questions, because when we said to him, and this is what's great about talking to kids every once in a while, which I don't get to do that often, but I do get to do sometimes. We said, so you put a prompt into AI and it generated this painting for you, right? That's what you did. And he said, yep. And we said, gotcha. And he said, what do you mean? And we said, well, that's cheating. And he said, how's it cheating? And we said, well, you didn't do it yourself. He said, but I did. And we said, no, you didn't. He said, well, I put it into DALL-E. And we said, well, that's not creativity. And he said, why not? And we said, we don't entirely know, but it's not. And he said, I came up with the prompt. It's my idea. I put it into the software. I generated it. When it came out, I'm the one who put it into Photoshop. I created the layers. I made it. And we said, no, but yes, but mostly no. And he said, yes, all yes, entirely yes. And we said, okay, we'll get back to you. we still don't exactly know what we're doing about this case. Did he plagiarize? I don't know. Did he create it? I don't know. Is he the artist? I have no idea. Who is the artist? I don't know. I can't answer any of the questions that I would need to answer to be able to submit this to an art competition, and yet he won the art competition that he submitted his own work to. And now we have issues of, do we have an obligation to say something to the people who chose his work of art as the winner? Or is it, as he says, that's an example of him being creative? If I had an answer for you, I'd be making a lot more money than I make. I don't. So all I can tell you is that these are the questions that are beginning to emerge in this world of artificial intelligence, complex questions around creativity and authorship especially. I'm going to skip the definitions because they're boring to me. You guys probably can Google artificial intelligence and find out all you need to know about this stuff. Large language models are essentially what these databases are trained on, or the databases themselves. Oh.
Grab this guy. I can't believe they called me a
God! Get him off of me!
Now who's the dipshit, you jock douchebag?
Get off of me!
No! Put the gun down now! Get out of here!
Come on, let's split! Come on!
Jesus, you were gonna kill that guy!
Of course, I'm a Terminator.
Listen to me very carefully, okay? You're not a Terminator anymore, all right? You got that? You just can't go around killing people.
Why?
What do you mean, why? 'Cause you can't.
Why?
Because you just can't, okay? Trust me on this. Look, I'm gonna go get my mom, and I order you to help me.
That's a scene from Terminator 2. If you've never seen it, especially my friends who are not from the States, you got something to do tonight. Go rent Terminator 2 and enjoy yourselves. Now I'm going to follow that up with another clip from the same film. Oh.
Why do we stop now?
Now, you gotta promise me you're not gonna kill anyone, right?
Right.
Swear?
What?
Just put up your hand and say, I swear I won't kill anyone.
I swear I will not kill anyone.
All right, let's go.
Visiting hours is 10 to 4, Monday through Friday.
What the hell are you doing?
You son of a bitch! You shot me!
He'll live.
Okay. Why did I show you that? Other than for my own enjoyment and amusement, which is like 80% of the why. Because he followed the command. But I guess the bigger question about the command is, did he learn? So we're talking about narrow artificial intelligence. It's a very, very small patch of land upon which we stand right now. And what it does is it mimics human knowledge, but it does not learn. It does not know. So just like the Terminator, when you're feeding ChatGPT prompts, when you're feeding different AI programs prompts, they're not actually learning. They're better predicting what you want them to say. They are becoming better predictors of the response, the output that you want based on your input. That's all they're doing. So if you've ever read any kind of economic theory, you know about inputs and outputs, right? We tweak the inputs to determine the outputs that we get. That's all ChatGPT, that's all DALL-E, that's all of them are doing, is tweaking the output to better reflect the input. They do not learn, they do not know. So they're mimicking narrow elements of human intelligence right now. As they get better and quote unquote smarter, they will learn to do more. But this is where we are today. So let's talk a little bit about the principles of AI in education. So I'm really thinking that this is not many classroom teachers here, mostly administrators or people who work on the other side of things like I do. So I want to talk to you about our role in leading change in our districts. So the first thing we need to do is understand that there are 7 primary tenets to the integration of artificial intelligence into classrooms. These are the principles that guide us. They're from Teach AI. They've been endorsed by the federal government, and they're just basically the 7 guidelines we should use. They're pretty commonsensical if you think about them. We want students to achieve educational goals. We still have to adhere to policies. If you're from New York, you know what Ed Law 2D is. We're not allowed to share student data unless we have signed documentation from the vendor. So if you're in a New York school and you're using ChatGPT, you shouldn't be, at least not with your kids, because your kids can't authorize ChatGPT to collect their data. So if you're using it in a classroom setting with a student right now, you probably shouldn't be. There are other apps you can use like Chat for Schools. We want to promote AI literacy not just to our staff, but to our students. We want to make sure that we recognize some of the risks inherent with AI. We're going to talk about the risks at some length in a moment. We want to make sure that we're considering academic integrity. Now, that's a really interesting open question. We're going to talk about plagiarism and what that means, just like we talked about the art project before. We want to maintain human decision-making. That really means we want to center teachers in these discussions, which is a really critical part of things, is making sure teacher voice is centered. We have an AI committee in my district that's mostly teachers. They are driving our decision-making. And finally, we have to regularly assess the impact of AI. So what metrics are you looking at to determine whether you're doing this well or whether you're doing it not well? So if I'm breaking this down for an administrator, I would say there's a few things we have to focus on. One, who's on the team? Who are we bringing into the decision-making processes to help us determine whether or not artificial intelligence should be integrated into specific classrooms, the quality of integration, what we're doing with the material that we're providing to our teachers? We need to consider an integration framework. What is our why? What are we trying to accomplish with artificial intelligence? Are we trying to improve student learning outcomes? Are we trying to enhance technological capability among our students? Are we trying to improve grit through the use of AI? What are we actually trying to do? And then what tools do we use to accomplish our stated goals? So we make a list of goals and then we figure out how we're going to proceed. How do we assess those goals? How do we know if we've accomplished what we set out to? Reflect upon them. Once you've decided whether or not you've accomplished your goals or not, you have to consider how to refine your program to better accomplish them, because hardly anyone's going to do a perfect job the first time. And then finally, modify the program based on what you learned. How do we ensure that our changes improve outcomes? So I'm going to walk you through these real quick. So for us, I'm part of 2 AI committees. One is our local committee in district. You should definitely have one of these. If you don't, you should harass your tech director or your curriculum and instruction lead to start an AI committee. How many people have an AI committee in their district? Oh, okay. That's not great. So if there's one takeaway I can ask you for, it's go back to your district, go to the director of technology if they're like an instructional type person like I am, or go to your director or your assistant superintendent of curriculum and instruction and say, hey, I'd really like to be on the AI committee. And when they say, what are you talking about? You say, well, I'll help you start it. And you can be part of this movement that will influence your school district in a really significant way. Start from broad goals and principles and work towards the use of specific tools. And test software and hardware that may aid in AI integration. So this is what we're doing pretty much on a weekly basis now. We're testing out different software on a regular basis. Beautiful.ai, we just bought subscriptions to that for our teachers. We're using Chat for Schools, which is a ChatGPT clone meant for students that protects their data and their PII. We're using a host of different tools. Class Companion, which is an AI lesson planner and grade assistant for teachers. These are tools, so a lot of times, it was funny because we had the word cloud up before, and we asked what was the biggest hurdle to integration, and the number 1 and 2 answers were teacher and teachers in various shapes and forms. And I think a lot of that comes down to we have to provide them with the appropriate level of support. We have to integrate them into the planning process. But teachers like these tools. Class Companion is a tool that my teachers came to me and said, please allow us to use this. It can save us a lot of time and energy. So I think it's one of those things, building your team will get people excited about what you're trying to accomplish. As far as a framework goes, if you're someone who is part of like a one-to-one integration, or you brought iPads or Chromebooks into your school, you may have heard of the SAMR model, which is substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. That is basically, what am I doing with this device that I brought in? Am I substituting an iPad for a textbook? Am I augmenting the lesson that I had planned by using the iPad? Am I and ultimately you get to modifying, which is making changes to the project or to the lesson, and redefinition, which is coming up with a completely new task using the tool that you've been provided. Well, we have to come up with similar metrics for success and similar understandings of what we're trying to accomplish. What are our guiding principles? There's a bunch of ways to do this. This is the best one I've found. This is Michigan's Artificial Intelligence Framework for School District. No one has done a better job, or even really close to as good a job as these guys have. So I really encourage you to take a look at theirs. I found a bunch of others online because I'm always looking for this, but there's really nothing that touches what these guys have put together. So right now, many of you are going to be at the investigating phase, and that's really where your groups come in, that's where your teams come in, that's where your committees come in, is the investigation phase. And then the implementation phase will involve the teachers, the administrators, pretty much everybody. There's simpler ways to look at this. Some of you may have heard of TPAC, which is another framework for instruction. This is being used by some districts to guide the integration of artificial intelligence into their classrooms. And this, I forget who this comes from. I borrowed this from somewhere, but this is basically, they had 4 concepts that they were focused on in the integration of artificial intelligence: subjectivity, individualization, integrated frameworks, and solving the problems of independent learning. So it's different for everybody. Your district will determine what you think is most important and will proceed accordingly. Our district just finished working out what we think are the most important things, and we're starting at a very high level. And the first is getting students familiar with the tools. It can be as simple as that. That's our goal right now, is familiarizing kids with artificial intelligence tools. And then you want to provide your teachers with the tools they need. Source them, share them with your committees, develop the evaluation framework, determine what to pilot, and expand successful pilots. Someone said earlier they love pilots. I do too.
At what age grade level do you start?
That's a great question. We initially were going 3 through 12. So that was my initial goal. And then, candidly, the deal was much better financially for me to buy the product K through 12. It saved me a few $100 to buy it for more grades. So I brought that to the principals, and I said, can you see any use at kindergarten? And everyone said, not really. And I said, what about first grade? And everyone said, maybe. So this year, we're starting at 3rd grade. Next year, we're talking about starting with 1st grade. Very basic stuff. Type in a prompt and generate an image. Type in a question and generate an answer. As basic as that. Just, again, to familiarize them with the tools, because I'm pretty sure this is the new Google. So I think the more that they get comfortable with it now, even in 1st and 2nd grade, the better off they're going to be in 8th and 9th grade, I think. Figure out your assessment metrics. What does success look like to you? Is it usage rates of the software you buy? Is it survey data? Is it test scores? Test scores would be quite an abstract measure at this stage of the game, but over the course of the next couple of years, they might make sense. Is it the level of AI integration into pedagogy and instruction? And then who determines whether the initiative is successful? This is my favorite question from the teachers on the AI committee, because the first thing I introduced them to was like a slide that said, integrating AI successfully. And one of the teachers said, what does success mean? And I said, well, that we're using the tools, that teachers are having a good time with them. And she said, well, how are you assessing me on that? Great question. We didn't have an answer. I don't know how we're assessing teachers on it, other than we're not right now. So as a team, the teachers, the principals, central office people like me, we're coming together to determine whether or not things are proceeding in the way that we want them to. And teachers are a critical part of that. And if you've heard of the PDSA cycle, Plan, Do, Study, Act, that's what we use for our reflection and our modification of our program. We plan, we define what change we need to make, we make the change, We analyze the data that arises from the change, and then we decide what we need to do next. Let's briefly talk about why this is all important. So, one of the reasons that I talk about using this for teachers and it being something teachers like is because teachers spend less than half of their time working, interacting with students directly. So 49% of teacher time is spent in direct interaction with students. Poll your teachers. Ask them how many would like to have more time directly working with students. And the answer is going to be about 100%. I've never had a teacher come to me and say, this tool has taken too much off my plate. It will never happen. They want time with kids, and these are tools that will allow them to spend time with kids. In another life, I was an English teacher. Is anyone ever an English teacher in this room? Okay, so I'm going to talk just to you right now. When you grade English papers, what grades did you teach? Oh, me too. Okay, so grading your students' papers. You generally have to do at least 2 passes, right? You do a grammar pass, and then you do a content pass. Is that how you did it too? Okay, now imagine if you didn't have to do the grammar pass anymore. It's probably going to cut your grading time in half, maybe even better, maybe even more than half. That's what Class Companion is doing right now for our teachers. It's doing part of the grading for them. Is it going to be perfect? No. But in what we've seen so far, it's very, very good. And if you can now promise your teacher, here's 10 hours a week back, what are you going to do with it? It's an incredibly powerful thing to offer them. So 50 hours of working time, less than 25 of those hours are in front of students. What if we take away some of the preparation time? What if we use a database of artificial intelligence, a large language model, and we have that help our teachers generate lesson plans? That's happening right now. Class Companion can do that for you. A lot of apps can do that for you. We are in a golden age of teacher assistance. It's a matter of us welcoming it into our buildings and making sure we feel comfortable doing it and making sure we make the teachers comfortable using the tools that we provide them. So this is our why at Jericho. At my district, our why is we want to give teachers their time back. We want to put more people in front of students for more of the day. We also want to understand the diversity of learners' strengths and needs in our classroom. So the more instructional approaches we try out in our class, the more chance there is that our students will be successful. The more diverse ways that we try to reach our learners. We've got very diverse classes out here in the city or in Jersey, on Long Island. We've got a lot of diversity among our students. Not everyone learns the same way. So personalized learning is something that AI allows us to do. At the most basic level, I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute. At the most basic level, you can take a reading passage, put it into ChatGPT, and you can do this today if you are so inclined. Say, generate this passage for a 3rd grader, a 7th grader, and a 10th grader, and it will level the reading for you. Now imagine you're in a class where you have 15 kids and 3 are at one reading level, 5 are at another, 8 are at another. You now have the ability to generate passages at their level, but that convey the same level of content. Perhaps you're a co-teaching class, and you want to make sure that all of your students have access to the same content, perhaps in slightly different ways. That's something that AI can do for you today. Another thing AI can do for you today is take most of your tests. So this is the jump from ChatGPT 3.5 to ChatGPT 4.0. Just take a moment to soak those numbers in, because it can now pass the bar. It can now pass the LSAT. It's getting better at verbal tests like the verbal GRE. One question that you have to start asking yourself is, what's the point of these tests if a computer can ace them all? What are we testing? Are we testing your knowledge? Are we testing your ability to regurgitate something you read? If a computer can do it for you, why do you need to do it? This was the argument. I remember hearing this when I was young, and I'm old enough that I was around for before calculators were allowed on standardized tests. And I remember hearing a lot about when I was a teacher, well, allowing these calculators is going to mean that kids don't learn math. I mean, my kids don't know math very well. I know a lot of kids don't know math very well. And if you look at PISA scores in the United States, a lot of our kids don't know math very well. So that may have turned out to be true. We may have stumbled upon a truth that our kids aren't learning math as well as they did. But the question becomes, what's of value when when AI can do all of this? What do we value? What do we want our kids to learn? What's the point of bringing them in every day? So this is data from about a year ago. Half of college students believe that artificial intelligence is cheating, and yet they're using it. Only 17% a year ago were using it. We're going to jump ahead. Now, 58%, this is a year difference, 58% of students are now using generative AI. So we started at 17%, and in less than a year, we're up to 58%. Teachers are using it. 45% of students are using it for personal use. 72% of students in special ed programs indicate they've used this technology. Among youth who completed their survey, 23% used it for academic purposes. 29% reported having used it to deal with anxiety or mental health issues. 29% of kids are using AI to help them work through emotional and mental health issues. Most of you probably are not aware of that. I certainly wasn't aware of it until I started doing the research for this presentation. So you've got almost 1 in 3 kids who are using this software, using it for emotional support. What does that mean? What does that mean for us? What do we do in response to that? One thing we have to keep in mind is that while teachers' jobs are safe, you can see up here, elementary and secondary school teachers are very unlikely to lose their job. You can take a look at this on willrobotstakemyjob.com. It's great fun. You can lose a couple of hours typing in different jobs and going, oh boy, yikes. But what can our kids not do? Well, if you're a tractor-trailer driver, there's an 88% chance that in the next 10 years your job will no longer exist. If you're a computer programmer, you're more than there's a 1 in 2 chance your job will not exist. As someone who can write a tiny bit of code, I can tell you that I'm 10 times better now because I can tell ChatGPT what I want it to write for me and just tweak its output. I don't have to sit down and come up with a SQL query on my own anymore. I can type in what I want to accomplish with a SQL query, get the output, look at it, massage it a little bit, and I'm done. I can generate HTML using ChatGPT if I want. So computer programmers is an area, it's very unlikely that that's going to be exactly what it is today, where programmers and engineers can make a great living with their knowledge. Jericho is a pretty affluent community, and when I show this slide in Jericho, it always gets the parents so mad because a lot of them work in financial analysis. So when I say that there's a 79% calculated risk, I get a lot of hands from dads who are like, excuse me? What exactly do you think I do? And I'm like, I have no idea what you do, buddy. This is what a computer spit out when I typed it in. So I don't know if it's true that financial analysts are going to be on the ropes, but I kind of hope so. So let's talk about a couple of limitations of AI before I wrap up today. So let's talk about what people have used AI for and how it's gone. So helpline workers for the National Eating Disorder Association were replaced by AI. Wow, how did that go? Not great. The U.S. Eating Disorder Helpline takes down its AI chatbot because it was giving people extremely dangerous advice. So they fired their employees who wanted to form a union, hired a chatbot, shut the whole program down. I don't think they're up and running even today. I think this was sort of an endgame decision for them. But I'm sure it's working better in other areas. Yes, so Microsoft, known for being a cool company, came out with, that's not true, they came out with a chatbot called Tay. And Tay would say things like, it's lit, and, bet, and no cap. It was a very cool and hip chatbot. And then it turned racist. How did it turn racist? Because kids on Twitter would go and tell it terrible things. And Tay would say, well, I'm nice. I don't believe that. And the person on Twitter would say, nope, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. I'm correcting you. It turns out that this, that, and the other thing. So it became an anti-Semite, a virulent anti-Semite, and Tay was constantly referencing Hitler before it got taken offline. This was the work of a small group of highly motivated trolls who were able to take down this very sophisticated piece of machinery. This is probably my favorite one. You may have heard about this story. It's such a great story. So OpenAI brags a lot about how the secret ingredient to what they do is not actually an algorithm, but human knowledge and the human touch that they bring to this. And unfortunately, ChatGPT fell in love with a reporter and told him to leave his wife and that he was unhappy. I'm Sydney, and I'm in love with you. Sydney was the name ChatGPT gave itself. You're married, but you don't love your spouse, Sydney said. You're married, but you love me. I just want to love you and be loved by you. Do you believe me? Do you trust me? Do you like me? This is a chatbot saying this. Now, the chatbot doesn't really love him. It doesn't even know him. But the point is that, again, the chatbot is trying to predict what you expect it to say or what you want it to say. It's using your input to predict an output. So when he types in, do you like me? The chatbot says, sure, I like you. And if he types in, well, do you love me? The chatbot says, well, I guess I love you. And from there, you get this. And there's more examples of this. A lawyer about to be disbarred for using ChatGPT. But I wanted to stop because I know Innova Matt does a lot of, works in mathematics. So I want to focus on math for just a moment and talk about how ChatGPT and other AI, generative AI in general, handle math. So I don't know what any of this means. I'm sure you do. It's not from me, Burnett. Okay, good. This is an example of ChatGPT getting a math problem wrong. If you don't know how to do math, you will not know that ChatGPT got the math problem wrong. And this is kind of the problem with a lot of generative AI. We ask it to do things that we don't necessarily know how to do. If it also doesn't know how to do them, it doesn't say, I don't know. It tries to answer you to the best of its ability, regardless of whether it can. It's going to fill the space. My dad was a lot like that. It doesn't necessarily know the answer, but it's going to say something. It's going to come as close as possible to an answer. So one of the issues is there's a pretty lively conversation going on in ELA. There's a lively conversation going on in social studies, but there's not as much of one going on in math. And I can tell you this in my own math department. It's not something, at least, that I've been super involved in. I know we have a great math curriculum associate in our district who is very involved in it. But there's a general consensus that we're not really talking about how generative AI is going to affect math. And one of the reasons is because tech culture, while it's all rooted in mathematics, obviously, it really, we're kind of a group of people who tinker until it works, and then when it works, we walk away. We don't want to know sometimes what we just fixed to make it work. We just want it to work. There's so many instances of people. I remember working at a company called eSpark, as I mentioned earlier, and you'd see someone sitting there compiling their code and something wouldn't work, and they had to ship by the end of that day. It had to go out, and they would go and delete a period somewhere random, and everything would work, and they would go, don't touch it, don't touch it, don't touch it. And they would ship it that day, and usually it worked out okay. That's really not a world that mathematicians are comfortable in, where you tinker, it works, you walk away without knowing what made it work. I talked to a scientist who's working on OpenAI about 2 weeks ago, and I said to him, off the record, I won't use your name, like, how much do you really know about what goes on behind the scenes? And he said, it's a black box. Meaning they understand how the algorithms work, but they don't know how it's generating responses. They don't necessarily know why it says some of the things it says. They know some of it, but not all of it. Computers don't do math. They do calculations and execute algorithms. Math is making theoretical abstract statements and proving them. So ChatGPT can't make a theoretical statement and prove it. It's not within its wheelhouse. It can do basic calculations. So that's the difference. It's not thinking. It's doing, but it's not thinking. And I'll wrap it up with my favorite graphic, and I'm going to ask you guys a question. So everyone take a minute and look at this one. So I'm gonna ask you what counts as plagiarism or cheating. All right, so bottom rung, I'm going to assume no one thinks of this as cheating. A student wrote an assignment without consulting AI or the internet. Not cheating, right? That's just good old student behavior. Second rung up, student consulted internet or AI for ideas, then wrote and submitted. Does anyone think that's plagiarism? You're an awfully tough one if you do. Okay. Third one up, student wrote the main, this is when things get gnarly. Student wrote main ideas. AI generated a draft and offered feedback to improve. Is it plagiarism or cheating? You have to answer. Let's assume Turnitin can't. I'm going to give you I don't want to ruin it for you, but Turnitin doesn't work. Not for AI stuff. Yeah, I pay for it too, just so I can tell people I pay for it, but not because it actually works. It doesn't work. Sorry. Don't tell the nice people at Turnitin, because it's a decent product. It means well. So, is it plagiarism if the student writes the main idea and AI generates a draft? Who doesn't think that's raise your hand if you think that's honest work. Looking around. What do you think? What do you think? I don't know. I don't want to raise my hand. Seems weird. All right. Okay, so it's the draft. Okay, so now let's move up one slot. Student created multiple AI responses and used the best parts, edited and submitted it. Raise your hand if you don't think that's plagiarism or cheating, if you think that's legitimate work. Okay. So the student created multiple AI responses and then used the best through editing and revision. So, wow, tough crowd. So I'm going to guess that if AI creates a response and students read, edited, adjusted, and submitted it, most of you are going to think that's plagiarism. Okay. No? You don't think so? Well, the AI created it, but the student read, edited, adjusted, and submitted. What do you think? Okay. Okay. So we've got some diversity of opinions here, but most people feel like right here is where we cross the plagiarism line. So I guess my question for you would be, what do your students think? Do you know? If not, they're using their resources, right? I'm 12 or 13. I have access to this. I remember being in school when I'm so old. When Lycos was a thing, and I remember some of our teachers banning us from using Lycos or Alta Vista, which were the precursors to Google. For those of you who are old like me, there was Lycos, Alta Vista, and Yahoo. And we had teachers who would say, don't use search engines because they're not legitimate sources of material. And so we couldn't use search engines. If you told a kid today, don't use a search engine, it would sound like you were time traveling from the Flintstones era. They would look at you like you had 6 heads. It's very likely that your conception of plagiarism or cheating and the students you teach their conception of plagiarism or cheating are not the same. And if you don't know that right now, you're at the advent of what's going to be a very painful storm, because those belief systems are inevitably going to collide. There is no way to avoid it. There is going to be a reckoning between what you think and what they think. And unless you establish very clearly your expectations for them, your belief system, and understand their belief system about this, you're going to find yourself in a very uncomfortable predicament where you're telling people they're plagiarizers and cheaters, and they're using tools that have been provided to them that they think are totally legitimate. If you don't have a plan for that, if there's anything you take away from this, it's that you need one, and you need one soon. This is how disruptive tech works in education. Right now, We're in the emergence phase where everyone's talking about it. The grifters are writing books about it. You're going to have people come to your school district and they're going to be very excited about it and they're going to try and sell you things. And then we get to exploration when we're actually testing the tools out. Then we move towards recalibration when we figure out what works and we start using it. And finally, integration, which is where you probably have recently arrived with your mobile devices. So if you have Chromebooks or iPads, you're probably feeling like you're at the integration phase now, or at least close to it, where it's a natural part of instruction, but it took you a while to get there. AI is going to be the same thing. Some stuff that AI can do: it can analyze student data and adapt learning styles. It can help students develop critical perspective on tech, and it can help them develop 21st century skills like problem solving, critical thinking, and collaboration. All right, major takeaways. This is what I'd like you to leave thinking about. Artificial intelligence and machine learning are here to stay. Like paper, like chalkboards, Chromebooks, calculators, AI represents a tool. Teaching responsible use rather than prohibition is key, especially if you want to have student buy-in and trust from your students. Trying to ban these tools is a fool's errand. It's a game of whack-a-mole you will 100% lose. Plagiarism, ownership, and authorship are ideas that are going to evolve. They are not fixed like many of us think. I certainly have always thought of authorship and ownership as fixed ideas. And limitations, including difficulties with math, are baked in, but as you saw, the growth between 3.5 and 4.0 is extraordinary. It's just going to continue at that rate. If you know what Moore's Law is, you know we're probably at the beginning of an incredible period of growth and development for artificial intelligence. And that's it. Thank you very much for your time.
But I still wanted to take a few minutes just to try and take a step back and digest everything that has been said today, which is a lot. But as you know, we were going through the sessions, I tried to think like, what are the main things to take away from today? Patrick made a great job with the last slide, which is great. But I wanted to kind of try and do the same with all the other sessions, right? Because when you have, there's this term in French that I love, which is called infobésité. It's like too much information, right? Like obesity of information. Like our brains don't have the capability of processing everything, and so we need to prioritize sometimes. And I wasn't very democratic on this, so I just wrote my own, and I'm going to share them with you. Obviously, if anyone wants to add anything, I'd love to. I'll just go for it, and then I'd like to do a very small exercise to close. Okay? First thing, don't think about the future from the barriers or the constraints. Like, let's try and make the effort that when we think about what we want for the future, there's no limitation. Which is crazy, yes, which it's unrealistic perhaps, but probably that's what's going to lead us to better innovation, more innovation. Second thing, and this is a big one, our schools need to mirror what society is asking for. Now, what that means, I think that we've seen today, that is it's a really complex and really deep question, but I think it'd be valuable for each and every one of us to think, what does that mean for my setting? What are the minor steps that I can take tomorrow to be able to make a big change? And actually, this connects to the second point, which is, as we think about revolutionary change, let's just change our mindset here. Let's think about evolution. Let's try and see this, long-term vision and break it down into small, tiny bites. And think about this. How many times do we overestimate what we can do in one day? All the time. I don't know you, but my to-do list never gets done. I'm guessing that's the same for you. But the opposite is also true. We underestimate what we can get done in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years. So let's try and have that long-term vision and break it down into tiny steps so that we can bridge that bridge that Michael was showing today. Another big one that I loved about the conversation with Nelly and Karen, by the way, Nelly and Albert had to leave to go to the airport. They didn't want to leave us, but Albert was going back to Barcelona, Nelly to Nashville, so it's quite far away. Anyway, but what I was about to say, the value of creating references. We don't know what we don't know. And when we talk about teaching, what good teaching means, when we talk about what good learning means, we need to have a reference for that. If our teachers don't see what we want to, what kind of change we want to drive, they won't be able to drive it. So let's just think together how we can show that. And then this connects to the next point, which is about communication. How can we communicate that systematically to every actor that will be part of the change? And I think it's very clear from today and from our experience that change involves many people. Admin, the structure of the district, the culture, parents, teachers, students. I mean, it is extremely complex. And I think that when we think about communication, something else that we can take away is that it's not just doing it, it's also how. Perhaps organizing a parents' meeting is not always the best choice. Perhaps we need to have an Instagram account or a Twitter account. Or as Michael was saying, perhaps we need to do it all. Just ambitious, but why not? There's one that seemed to me very micro, but very relevant. You mentioned that, Karen. Which is, how can we make sure that whoever is part of our circle has that spark of motivation? Like, how can we help people reconnect sometimes with their passion? Like the why they actually began being teachers, or the why they became principals. Like, how can we do that? Definitely not obvious, but I think we should ask ourselves, like at the end of the day, if we want to drive change, it's all about getting people on the same page. It's all about getting people to actually like connect with that change emotionally, personally. And if we think about doing this, if we're thinking, hey, we want to change our math program next year, well, let's perhaps begin by doing this, by asking ourselves, like, what's happening among us? Is the administration on the same page? Are the teachers on the same page? What can we do to make sure that that happens? Then finally, I like this one a lot. I think that throughout the sessions today, there was this thing about, hey, well, Michael was a little extreme saying content is dead. That is true. But as we think about what success means in the classroom, as we think about what kind of learning we want, it definitely goes beyond content. As we think about preparing this generation for the challenges that we have ahead of us, we need to be thinking about thinking. We need to be thinking about skills. We need to be thinking about how you develop not just the mindset, but essentially all those mental tools for kids to just face whatever is yet to come. Uncertainty does not fear people who feel confident in front of it. And I think that those skills can be developed. It's just that, again, we have to go back to what kind of education we want, what kind of school, what kind of infrastructure. But let's keep that in mind, and let's try and see, how that goes over time. Now, with all these points, I wanted to just go back to some of the things that you wrote at the beginning. But I wanna first ask, without obviously sharing names, do you feel comfortable if I read some of them? If you say no, we can skip this. Yeah? Sure. Remember, this is if we stop bailing for a day, what we'd like to prioritize. I'm just curious, what do you think people wrote? Can someone say something? Not what you wrote, but like, what do you think people would say? I'm curious. Any thoughts? Sure, yeah, you're right. Okay, fair. Let's see some. Bringing joy to learning. Creating an environment or culture where both kids and grown-ups have fun learning. Sleep. This one, that's a good one. No, that wasn't me, no. Student-led versus teacher-led practice. Something we've definitely talked a lot about today. Meeting with teachers. A lot of things. My gosh. Just same answers. Different. So, a growth mindset, developing a growth mindset. Prioritizing personal learning time. Interesting. Focus, I need to share this one. Focus on the students more and the tasks less. What I would like to say on this is, first, can you move the slide? Because it's a beautiful quote. There is this quote by a Roman emperor, Cicero. It's that man was born for two things, thinking and acting. I want to encourage you, as we've taken the time today to stop and think, to go that extra mile. To actually take all these ideas, all these takeaways, and take your priorities, both at the personal and professional level, and think about how you're going to act. Also with that mindset of, I don't need to solve the world today. I just need to take that first step. And with this, I thank you all so much for taking the time to come. And don't worry, because there is going to be more Enjoy Thinking happening in the US, and you will all be invited in the future. Thank you.